Animals often possess an uncanny ability to sense trustworthiness in people, and this story of a tiger in desperate need proves just how extraordinary that instinct can be. Everything was peaceful and still on Eric's secluded mountain cabin, nestled in the rugged wilderness of Montana, where snowstorms frequently isolated him from the outside world. Winter had blanketed the landscape in a serene, icy stillness, and Eric was enjoying the quiet until a heavy thud outside broke the silence. Curiosity mixed with caution as Eric stood up to investigate. Living alone in a region teeming with wildlife meant that both human and animal encounters carried risks, especially with no nearby neighbors to call for assistance in case of trouble. He grabbed his pellet gun, a weapon that couldn't kill but made enough noise to scare away potential threats, and cracked the door open, peering into the cold. Just as he was about to step outside, a low, rumbling growl froze him in place. That unmistakable sound sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. It was a tiger, and judging by the deep resonance of the growl, it was a massive one. Eric retreated back inside quickly, heart racing, and moved to the nearest window to get a clearer look. His breath caught as he spotted the source of the growl, a tiger lying motionless in the snow, just a few feet from his cabin. The animal was enormous, its thick coat marked with black stripes standing out against the stark whiteness of the snow. Yet, its powerful body looked lifeless, save for the shallow rise and fall of its chest. The tiger barely had the strength to lift its head, and it moaned weakly in pain. Its pitiful state tugged at Eric's heart. There were no visible injuries, but something was clearly very wrong. Eric paced back and forth, torn about what to do. As much as he wanted to help, he knew this was a dangerous predator, capable of ending his life in seconds if it felt threatened. Those massive paws, equipped with razor-sharp claws, and its powerful jaws made it clear he couldn't risk stepping outside. Still, he couldn't just stand by and do nothing while the tiger suffered. Desperate for guidance, Eric grabbed his phone and called several sanctuaries and wildlife rescue organizations in the area. Most explained they couldn't get through the snow-covered roads to reach him. Finally, one sanctuary agreed to send a team, but they estimated it would take over an hour to arrive. The waiting was excruciating. From inside the cabin, Eric watched as the tiger barely clung to life. He opened a window slightly and tossed out small chunks of meat in an attempt to feed it, but the tiger ignored the offerings, only sniffing weakly before resting its head back on the snow. Eric then filled a water bottle and, using a cautious toss, splashed a small puddle near the tiger. This time, the animal lifted its head and drank a few sips before collapsing again, as if the simple act of drinking had drained all its energy. Watching the magnificent creature in such a vulnerable state was heartbreaking. Its massive frame shivered violently, and its once proud demeanor had been reduced to pure desperation. Eric wished he could do more, but all he could do was wait for the rescue team to arrive. Finally, the rumble of a truck's engine echoed through the snowy valley, and Eric felt a wave of relief. The sanctuary team arrived, but their presence seemed to agitate the tiger. It tried to stand, only to collapse back into the snow. The sight of multiple people seemed to increase its distress, and its weakened growls betrayed a mix of fear and defiance. One of the rescuers prepared a tranquilizer dart, aiming carefully to avoid causing unnecessary pain. Eric, standing behind his window, softly called to the tiger, his calm voice somehow helping to ease its panic. The dart hit its mark, and the tiger's movements stilled as it drifted into unconsciousness. The tiger fell asleep almost instantly after the tranquilizer took effect, finally allowing the rescue team to examine him. Eric stepped outside, eager to understand what was wrong with the animal. As the sanctuary workers lifted the tiger's massive paw to check his condition, Eric's breath caught in his chest. A large, hairless scar ran along the tiger's leg, a brutal reminder of an old wound. In that moment, Eric realized why the tiger had come to his homestead. This wasn't a random encounter. They had met before. 3 years earlier, Eric had encountered the tiger as a cub. At that time, Eric still had his beloved family dog, Daisy, a loyal and aging companion. One frigid morning, Daisy started growling at something outside and darted into the snow-covered woods. Given her advanced age and frailty, such exertion was dangerous, and Eric quickly followed, worried she wouldn't make it far in the bitter cold. Daisy had gone farther than Eric expected, almost beyond the boundaries of his property. When he finally caught up to her, she was barking furiously at something lying in the snow. Daisy had a history of chasing small animals like snakes, but Eric knew her reflexes had slowed with age. He was afraid she might still risk an encounter. Rushing to her side, he knelt down in the snow to see what had captured her attention. What he found took him by surprise: a tiny tiger cub, trapped and injured. The cub had been caught in a metal trap, its leg badly wounded where sharp steel teeth had clamped down. Blood stained the snow around the cub, and there was no sign of its mother. Eric had never set any traps on his land and was angered that someone else had left such a cruel device. Speaking softly to calm Daisy, Eric managed to steady her while carefully freeing the cub from the trap. He wrapped the trembling, bloodied creature in his jacket. The cub was so weak it didn't resist, its small body shivering uncontrollably. The injury was severe, and Eric doubted the tiny animal would survive the night. Still, he couldn't just leave it to die. For the next several days, Eric repeatedly checked the area for signs of the cub's mother. However, there were no fresh tiger tracks in the snow. It became evident that the mother had moved on, likely forced to abandon her injured cub to protect her remaining offspring. The cub would have perished in the freezing temperatures had Daisy not led Eric to it. Even then, its survival was uncertain. The cub, who Eric later named Cato, was incredibly fragile. Its wound was deep, and it was far too young to fend for itself. Eric contacted a local wildlife shelter for advice, but the harsh winter weather made it impossible for anyone to reach his remote cabin. He realized that if Cato was to have any chance, he would have to care for the cub himself. The shelter's vet provided instructions over the phone, guiding Eric on how to nurse the cub back to health. They recommended a milk mixture suitable for young animals, medicines to stave off infection, and techniques for cleaning the wound. Eric had most of the supplies he needed thanks to his preparations for winter, but supplies alone couldn't guarantee success. The cub's condition was critical, and every passing hour felt like a small victory. To ease the cub's pain, Eric mixed a small amount of a sedative into its milk. With great care, he cleaned the wound and stitched the torn flesh, though infection remained a constant threat. At first, the cub lay completely still, too weak to protest. As the days went by, however, Cato began to show signs of life. He grew more alert and even feistier when Eric tried to tend to his injuries. Eric couldn't help but smile at the cub's growing spirit, even as it scratched and bit at his hands during treatments. Eric worked tirelessly to clean Cato's wound in the days that followed. The infection was severe, and it required daily care. Initially, the tiny cub was too weak to resist. He lay still, allowing Eric to clean and bandage him without protest. However, as Cato began to grow stronger, his patience wore thin. He started squirming during treatments, occasionally nipping at Eric's hands or clawing at him. To protect himself, Eric resorted to wearing heavy gloves whenever he needed to treat the cub. Despite the scratches and bites, Eric found it heartening to see Cato regaining his energy. The feisty behavior was a sign of recovery, and it brought a bittersweet smile to Eric's face. That smile faded one morning when Eric went to check on Cato and found him lying unresponsive in his crate. Panic surged through him. There was no time to call for advice. Trusting his instincts and the first aid training he'd learned long ago, Eric began performing chest compressions on the lifeless cub. Each second felt like an eternity, but finally, Cato gasped and stirred. Relief washed over Eric as he realized he'd saved the cub from the brink of death. Once Cato was stable, Eric called the sanctuary vet to explain what had happened. The vet confirmed Eric's suspicion. Cato likely had a lingering infection that required immediate treatment. They instructed Eric to administer a course of antibiotics, which he did meticulously. As the days passed, Cato's health steadily improved. The cub, sensing Eric's care and dedication, began to trust him completely. Eric could now give him medicine directly, placing it in his mouth much like he would for Daisy, his late dog. The bond between them grew stronger, and it wasn't uncommon to find Cato napping next to Daisy, their unlikely friendship a source of warmth in Eric's otherwise solitary life. Though the bond with Cato brought Eric immense joy, he couldn't ignore his growing concern about domesticating the cub. Tigers were wild creatures, meant to roam freely, and Eric feared that his care was making Cato too dependent on humans. However, with the harsh winter outside, Eric had no choice but to keep Cato close and continue interacting with him. He reasoned that survival outweighed everything else at the moment. By the time spring arrived, Cato had grown considerably. His wound had fully healed, leaving behind an ugly scar where the fur never regrew, a lasting reminder of his difficult start in life. Cato was healthy and strong, and Eric began to see glimpses of his natural instincts. As the weather warmed, Cato started venturing farther from the homestead. At first, he would disappear for a few hours and return with small birds or other prey, which he proudly ate in the yard. It was clear that Cato was learning to hunt on his own. Gradually, Cato's absences grew longer. Eric often found himself waiting for the cub to return, each time fearing that something might have happened to him. Then, one day, Cato left and didn't come back. Eric was heartbroken but consoled himself with the thought that Cato had become self-sufficient. He was no longer the helpless cub Eric had found in the snow. He was now a capable tiger, ready to thrive in the wild. Over the years, Cato made sporadic appearances on Eric's property. He never came too close and always maintained his distance, but he also showed no aggression. Eric respected this boundary, watching the tiger from afar with a mixture of pride and longing. Cato was not a pet, he was a wild animal, and Eric knew it was best to let him live freely. It had been 2 years since Eric had last seen Cato, and he often worried about what might have become of him. In the meantime, Eric's life had changed, he had lost Daisy to old age, and the pain of her absence lingered. Though he considered getting another dog, he wasn't ready. As winter approached, he decided to wait until the season passed. But just as he made that decision, Cato returned, bringing both joy and concern. This time, however, the magnificent tiger was in dire condition. When the rescue team examined him, their faces were grim. Cato's teeth were badly infected, likely causing unbearable pain. The severity of his condition was clear, and Eric's worry deepened. The tiger that once symbolized strength now needed urgent help to survive once more. The rescue team explained to Eric that Cato had most likely been injured while defending his territory or during a hunt. The inner pulp of several teeth was exposed, leaving him in severe pain and at high risk of a bacterial infection. Judging by the state of the injuries, it was clear the problem had been untreated for quite some time. The situation was urgent, and the team had to act swiftly to prevent the worst. It was a race against time, and their determination to save Cato's life was evident. Typically, treating a wild animal like Cato would involve a single injection of antibiotics before releasing him back into the wild. However, his infection was too advanced for such a simple solution. He would need ongoing treatment and support to regain his strength. The team decided to transport Cato to their sanctuary, where they could provide round-the-clock care. While Eric was relieved that Cato would receive the attention he desperately needed, he felt a twinge of sadness. For years, he had taken responsibility for the tiger's well-being, and now, others would be stepping in to help him. As the team began preparing Cato for transport, the massive tiger stirred. His eyes opened slightly, and he let out a soft growl, causing the rescuers to freeze in place. It became apparent that the tranquilizer dose wasn't strong enough. To ensure everyone's safety, they sedated him again, this time more thoroughly. Once Cato was fully unconscious, they worked together to lift him. It was no easy task, the tiger's weight was immense, and without a specialized crane on site, they had to improvise. Using a rope system, they finally managed to load Cato into the truck and secure him for the journey to the sanctuary. As the vehicle pulled away from Eric's property, he stood watching, feeling a mix of emotions. He had done everything he could for Cato, but now it was up to the sanctuary team to ensure his survival. Eric's sense of responsibility for the tiger lingered, and he could only hope that Cato would pull through. The following day, Eric called the sanctuary for an update. He was relieved to hear that they had successfully drained an abscess in Cato's mouth, a critical step in addressing the infection. The team was also giving him fluids and softer foods to aid in his recovery. Encouragingly, Cato had begun eating again, a positive sign that his strength was returning. Eric felt a wave of happiness, knowing that Cato was on the road to recovery. However, the relief was short-lived. When Eric called for another update the next day, the news was shocking: Cato had escaped from the sanctuary. Eric couldn't believe it. How could this happen? The sanctuary staff explained that Cato had been recovering in a medical bay, a smaller enclosure meant for close monitoring. Although he was still in need of care, his strength had returned significantly. One of the student volunteers, mistakenly perceiving Cato as tame, had approached too closely. The student made a grave error by opening the gate and trying to interact with Cato. Not recognizing the teenager, Cato growled in warning, startling the volunteer. In a panic, the student fled the enclosure, forgetting to close the gate behind him. The tiger, strong enough to move on his own, simply walked out and disappeared into the surrounding wilderness. The rescue team was immediately on high alert, knowing the risks. Cato was still in dire need of medical treatment and now roamed miles away from the safety of the sanctuary. The situation became even more pressing as they considered the potential dangers he might encounter. Farmers in the area were known to view predators like tigers as threats, and a confrontation with humans could end in disaster. The team began organizing a search for Cato, knowing the stakes were higher than ever. Meanwhile, Eric was left grappling with his own anxiety. The tiger he had saved twice before was now out in the wild, fighting against both his injuries and an unforgiving environment. Eric could only hope that the sanctuary team would locate Cato in time. The potential dangers surrounding Cato's escape weighed heavily on everyone's minds. News of the tiger's disappearance from the sanctuary spread quickly, creating an atmosphere of urgency and unease. Eric couldn't stop worrying about the situation. The rescue team, fully aware of the risks involved, wasted no time in organizing a thorough search. Cato, still weakened by his untreated infection, was out in the open, far from the safety of the sanctuary or his natural territory. The thought of the tiger wandering onto farmland or encountering unsuspecting humans loomed large, especially in areas where predators were viewed with fear and hostility. With a mixture of anxiety and determination, the rescue team mobilized. They meticulously combed through surrounding areas, setting up traps and deploying tracking equipment to locate any sign of the majestic tiger. Working closely with local authorities, they spread the word about Cato's escape, urging caution and enlisting the community's help. Posters were distributed, and public announcements were made, warning people to stay vigilant and report any sightings immediately. Eric, too, stayed by his phone, ready to assist however he could. Days turned into nerve-wracking weeks. The team tirelessly scoured the countryside, their efforts unwavering despite the mounting pressure. Every passing moment heightened the risk of Cato succumbing to his infection or wandering into a dangerous situation. The longer he remained missing, the greater the danger to both him and those who might encounter him. Still, the team refused to give up, their hope fueled by their commitment to saving Cato. Then, one fateful afternoon, a breakthrough came. A farmer living on the outskirts of a nearby town reported seeing a tiger near the edge of his property. According to the farmer, the tiger appeared to be cautiously navigating the unfamiliar terrain, likely in search of food or water. The news sent a wave of relief through the rescue team, who immediately sprang into action. Armed with tranquilizers and a carefully crafted plan, they headed to the location, determined to bring Cato back safely. Approaching the area with utmost caution, the team knew the risks involved in confronting a tiger, even one as weak as Cato. Any sudden movement or noise could provoke a dangerous reaction. Eric, unable to stay away, joined the team at the site, his heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. They spotted Cato lying in a shaded area, his massive body visibly fatigued but still exuding a quiet strength. Holding their breath, the team prepared the tranquilizer dart, knowing they only had one chance to get it right. Fortune smiled on them that day. The dart hit its mark, and Cato, though startled, succumbed to the tranquilizer's effects, slipping into a deep, peaceful slumber. The team moved swiftly, securing the tiger and carefully loading him into their transport vehicle. Eric stood by, watching intently, his emotions oscillating between relief and worry. Despite the risks, they had managed to find and rescue Cato before it was too late. Upon arriving back at the sanctuary, the exhausted team was met with a flurry of activity. Veterinarians and caretakers immediately began tending to Cato, placing him in a secure, spacious enclosure equipped with all the medical facilities he needed. Over the following weeks, Cato's recovery became the sanctuary's top priority. His infection was treated with great care, and his strength gradually returned. The team monitored his progress day and night, ensuring he had the proper diet, medication, and rest to regain his health. Finally, the day everyone had been working toward arrived. Cato was deemed fit for release. The sanctuary staff carefully selected a vast wilderness teeming with wildlife, a place where Cato could reclaim his rightful place in the natural world. On the day of his release, Eric joined the sanctuary team, standing alongside them as they watched Cato step out of his enclosure and into the wild. His massive silhouette blended seamlessly with the untamed landscape, a testament to his resilience and strength. As the tiger disappeared into the wilderness, Eric felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had played a crucial role in giving Cato not one but two chances at life. The rescue team, too, shared in the triumph, knowing their relentless efforts had saved an extraordinary creature. Cato's story soon spread, capturing the hearts of people worldwide. It became a testament to the power of compassion, the resilience of nature, and the tireless dedication of those who fight to protect it. Eric stood silently, reflecting on how far they had come. Cato, the helpless cub he had once saved, was now a symbol of hope and survival. Though their paths had diverged, their connection remained unbreakable, a reminder of the impact one act of kindness can have. Ultimately, this story urges us to cherish the bonds we form, to act with kindness in every encounter, and to recognize that even the smallest gestures can leave profound impacts on others.